Hey YouTube, so this is a response to Metatron's video, M1 Global Bullshit and Nonsense. I don't know, I don't care what it's called, but this is a response. So this is coming from somebody who does have a very strong HEMA bias and doesn't compete in M1, doesn't know anybody who does compete in M1, and I'm also not one of these guys who thinks that all martial arts are equal and it's purely the practitioner and the art has nothing to do with it. So yeah, I've got no vested interest or axe to grind in this. This is just a simple disagreement. Hopefully it doesn't trigger people too much, but if you are triggered, hopefully this can start a discussion. If I'm wrong, I want to know about it too. So, the first thing I disagree with Metatron on is he thinks that M1 Global using the word medieval falsely implies that what they're doing is historically accurate. Now, I disagree because I don't assume something is historically accurate simply because it has medieval in the title. And I think if somebody does assume something's historically accurate because it has medieval in the title, that's on them, and it's not on the product or the entertainer or anything like that. How many books, how many films, how many TV shows, how many video games have medieval in their title and aren't historically accurate in the slightest? Absolutely thousands. So yeah, it is up to, it's on the person watching. It's their fault if they falsely assume that it's historically accurate. So I'm not triggered by that word. I am when people use words like realistic or historically accurate or scientific. That is, when it's not, that is them genuinely being misleading, or putting out poorly researched bullshit. But using the word medieval, no, I'm not too worried about that. Metatron next talks about an interview he saw with a girl who's now part of M1. She said that I haven't seen the video, but from the way Metatron described it, she was saying how she was always interested in knights and sword fighting and that kind of thing as a kid, and then she wandered into one of these M1 gyms and found it and thought it was cool and decided to do it. Now Metatron's saying, do HEMA, just do HEMA, it's better. But you know what? Yeah, people like us, we do like the historical side of it. We do like being right, but other people just want to hit each other with swords, and there's really nothing wrong with that. Maybe she would prefer HEMA if she knew about it. Maybe she wouldn't, but it's not the fault of M1 that she's not doing HEMA. I don't see how they can be held accountable for that. Myself. We've now got 2 HEMA clubs in my city. 3 years ago we only had 1, and before that we didn't have any. If I wanted to do anything practical with swords, the closest I could get, unfortunately, would have been LARP. There's 2 LARP clubs in my city, neither of them I particularly like the sound of. But, it's not those LARP clubs' fault that there's no HEMA in my city. In fact, they can actually help. There's 2 people in my HEMA group who do LARP regularly, and there's a few others who've dabbled with it in the past, and the 2 which do come from the LARP club, they found out about HEMA from talking to people in LARP. So, if anything, M1 could actually be pretty beneficial to HEMA in that regard. So I've got no problem with them whatsoever. Now, yes, I do think it is worth talking about the way that it would differ from how people would have thought historically. Very, very important conversations to be had. But that's nothing against M1. That's just talking about the difference between sport and reality. Metatron goes on to talk about the way points are scored in M1. What he says, I think, is a little bit misleading. He rightfully talks about how they'll score points from just managing to hit the plates, but and yes, that by itself is rather silly, but that isn't the only way they score points. What they'll often do is, there'll be try to suss out their opponent. They'll maybe throw something in to see how they react, and then maybe they'll try and get that reaction from them, and as they're doing it, they'll close in, tackle them to the floor, get on top of them, bash the shit out of them with the shield until the fight ends. So in that regard, it's much like Olympic boxing. Yes, if nobody directly wins with a KO, then it will go down to points. But they do still have they still do have that aspect in it as well, where they are actually trying to legitimately end the fight. Now, historically, sure, you might hit each other with the shields, but you're probably more likely to have some sort of knife and get on top of them and shove it in between the gaps in the slit in their visor, or just in their face if they don't have any kind of face covering. Obviously you can't do that for safety reasons, and you know what they're actually doing in M1 when they do manage to get down and close them down, get them onto the ground and start bashing the shit out of them. Once they would have got into that situation historically, chances are, almost certain they would win the fight at that stage of it. So, yeah, I think what Metatron was saying about the point scoring was a little bit misleading there. There is some aspect of realism in how they fight. So yeah, they do actually do some things which are somewhat accurate. And also, HEMA isn't completely realistic either in how we spar. So if I'm sparring with someone and they manage to hit me that hard in the forearm, they've just scored a point. But that wouldn't have even cut through my Gambazon historically. Yet, here we go, they've scored a point, we have to get back to distance and then start again. It is a very good way of doing it for the most part, but it does have aspects about it which does make it unrealistic. So even if somebody did manage to get a strike hard enough to cut through my Gambazon, and I'm starting to fucking bleed out there, and in another 20 seconds I'd be dead, that doesn't stop the fact that, for those 20 seconds, I'm still going to be very, very, very dangerous for that time. And point sparring, unfortunately, does teach people to relax a little bit more after they've managed to get a strike in, and it doesn't have that sort of more animalistic, more aggressive follow-up which you would get from something like M1. So there are pros and cons to both ways of doing it. It's not just that M1 is 100% horseshit. There are certain things about it which I think people from HEMA could actually learn from. Check what was next. Metatron then talks about how a historical knight could take on like 4 of these guys at once. Now, I do disagree with that. These guys aren't just a bunch of fucking jokers in there. These guys generally have a lot of MMA experience. Some of them even have quite a bit of HEMA experience. I think one of them actually won a fairly big longswording contest. So, these guys aren't complete losers going in there. These guys are genuinely very, very skilled fighters, even if you don't like the particular rule set which they're fighting on in M1. And if they had sharp swords and they were fighting to the death, maybe they would fight very differently. To think that they're shit at real sword fighting because what they're doing and that is unrealistic is like assuming that somebody's crap at chess because they play drafts. Maybe they're good at both. And with them being very skilled grapplers, I think that a knight would have a very, very hard time against 2 of them. I would put money on the M1 fighters if it was 2 of them versus 1 knight. When he was dealing with one of them, another one would have found an opening to close in and tackle them to the floor, and chances are their grappling is going to be on par, if not better, than a historical knight's. Finally, Metatron talks about how ridiculous the spinning attacks are in it, and from the vast majority of what we do in HEMA, I think that spinning attacks are bullshit. But in the context of M1, they work. It's as simple as that. In fact, the clips which Metatron showed actually did show those spinning attacks work, and at worst, they didn't open them up such that the other person was able to take advantage of that. And yeah, there are reasons why that is the case. So in MMA, you will see spinning back fists. Perhaps I'm going to step forward with this hand, and I'm going to come in with that one. And the reason that's going to work in MMA is that both of your hands are effectively equal weapons. When you're fighting when you've got a one-handed sword, or even a two-handed sword, now this isn't a sword obviously, but I don't have room to swing this around. But when you've only got one weapon, you do only have one weapon, obviously, and so to spin around, you are going to leave yourself wide open before you're able to attack, and it would simply make far more sense to simply attack like that if you want to actually spin the weapon all the way round. You're stepping in you're just doing a single step in that circumstance, and so that's fine. You've got your eyes on them the whole time. And with swords, when you're unarmoured, it is very, very, very high risk to have your back to your opponent, because one strike and you're dead. Now, neither of those factors apply when you've got a sword and shield. In this case, spear and shield, but whatever. When you have, they've got armour for a start, so one strike to the back of the head or the back probably isn't going to be the end of the world, and you can get away with doing doing higher risk manoeuvres. That said, the risk is also not as high because you have something in the other hand. A spinning attack isn't necessarily slow. If you can do a 180 rather than a 360, it's just as fast as taking an ordinary step. Now, I am no expert in sword and buckler, and I don't know if any historical manuals talk about the techniques. All I'm saying is that the empirical evidence shows that those techniques do actually bloody work. But, for example, if I've stepped once, and I'm able to cover myself here, in fact maybe I'll be stepping a bit further across here, I don't have to do a full 360 to do a spin. All I need to do is a 180, which is just as fast as taking one step forward with one foot, because all I need to do is bring that back foot round my back to there in order to attack. So yeah, that combined with some good footwork, you're going to get a lot of power from it. It's not going to be too high risk, and so yeah, those techniques could work in certain circumstances, and they did. The clips Metatron shows, the attacks either landed or perhaps they missed, but the other person wasn't able to capitalise on it. So there isn't anything martially wrong with those techniques and the evidence we could see. And the other time I saw somebody do a spinning attack, I don't have room to do it, but the guy was really kind of on his back foot. I don't know what happened in the seconds earlier, but the guy was, in a bad way. He was stuck down in a position like this, where there wasn't really very much he could do. If he stayed there, he was going to get the shit kicked out of him. So he did a bit of a desperation move. So I think he kind of got back and kind of span. But yeah, the attack didn't land. Or if it did, it certainly didn't seem to do very much damage. But it got him out of that tricky situation. It got him out of a situation where he was going to get the crap kicked out of him. So there was nothing wrong with the technique. The technique was actually beneficial. But I think all of the clips Metatron showed of the spinning attacks being used, they either didn't really do very much or they were beneficial. None of the time did it end badly for the person using it. So yeah, I think Metatron, you need to look at the evidence, and the evidence in that case shows that in the context of M1, there is nothing wrong with spinning attacks. provided they're actually used right. So finally, I'm actually going to show you guys one of the M1 fights. It's the first one, I think it's the first link I found on Google, first round, so I'm certainly not cherry picking here, but let's see how they fight. Play. Okay. Here we go. Yeah, it's very different to what we see in HEMA, but we are seeing elements of skill here. They're both very careful about their distance, sizing each other up, throwing a few simple attacks in just to see how the other person reacts to them, seeing what their sort of natural responses are, and from there getting a bit more aggressive. Good shield strike there. That would certainly hurt even with a steel helmet on. And yeah, these cuts are probably very unlikely to have been used historically, but they're not cutting for the sake of cutting. They're trying to intimidate each other, they're trying to force the other person to react in a certain way, and from there try and close in just like we saw there. So they're closing in again. I think he's trying to go for an Ogoshi or something. No, the other guy just squishes him. Got a struggle. But he's up. And there he goes. He shows them how it's done. He's got the Ogoshi. And that there, from the grappling, that is pretty realistic. That is, you know, once they got into that grappling range, I could actually see them fighting in that way. And the other techniques which would work, so half-swording, smashing the pole and things like that, you know, they are too bloody dangerous to do when you're sparring for the most part. Yeah, there's some armoured sparring I've seen where they do try to focus on going for the gaps and things like that, but for the most part, you know, that seems to be done at a very, very slow pace, and it's it's a lot more boring to watch than something like this. And you know, the guys responsible for M1, they're simply giving the public what they want to see, and those of us who would see something like that and want to delve a bit deeper, then you know, there's nothing stopping those sorts of people from finding something like HEMA if that's the sort of thing they prefer. So thanks for watching, comment, rate, subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.